It's a ham radio.
The Cadillac of ham radios.
Hello everyone, welcome back to yet another episode of Ham Radio, a Stranger Things podcast. We've got a great episode for you today as usual, but first, we have a little housekeeping to take care of, and I'm going to turn it over to Jasmin to let you know where you can find us on social media and where you can listen to the podcast.
Thanks, Ashley. You can find us on Instagram at Ham Radio Media, all one word, on Twitter at HamThrow, on YouTube at Ham Radio Media, or using our handle HamRadio1983. We also have a Discord you can join, which is linked in the description of this episode. If you have a fan theory or question you want to share, you can email us at hamradiomedia@gmail.com. Ashley also has a fanfic on AO3 entitled Stranger Things College, which is also linked in the description. The podcast is available on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and much more. If you like the show, please consider leaving us a rating or review. We have a lot of totally tubular stuff coming up, so be sure to follow us on social media to keep up with the podcast and all of our new content.
You can't blame a girl. I mean, I get it. I can only speak for myself, but girls at that time who see a guy like Steve, that you take one look at the guy and you're like, he's a good time. He's a really good time. And you have that good time, and a lot of people, they move on from that good time because the good times can only last for so long before you get in each other's faces and realize you don't like each other. You don't like the way that they brush their teeth. You don't like the side of the bed that they sleep on. They don't want to waste time trying to figure out and fix those kind of things. They just want the good time, and then they want to move on.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree.
Which it's very clear that Nancy doesn't see him as that at all, because she'd have jumped his bones at Skull Rock.
Right?
She'd have had her good time and moved on. She sees him and she's like, this guy is protective and brave, and he puts himself out there, and he's comfortable in a position where he's able to handle these unusual situations where things around us are moving very quickly and we don't really have much of a choice. And he can adapt to what I'm doing. Like he's all of it at one time. She sees exactly what she needs, and she doesn't look at that and just see, whatever these girls that he's dating is seeing, which is just, he's hot. He has a great body. He's probably great in bed. Like, that's all. And now I'm going to go on to college and, live my college life.
Yeah, and Steve outright says it. He's like, well, the problem with Heidi is that she's going to stay out of school. Do I want another meaningless fling? No. Yeah. That he wants a meaningful connection with somebody who sees, don't get me wrong, Nancy obviously sees all of that. How can she not? That's very obvious, but who also wants that meaningful connection as well. Not just with anyone, but with him.
Yeah, 100%.
So, to that point, moving on to season 4, I think we all know the answer to this one, but do you think that Steve and Nancy are endgame, and how would you like to see that storyline play out?
There's a difference between like to play out and how I actually see it play out. Yes, they're endgame. There's no question about that. It's not even a question. Of course they're endgame. Why would the Duffers waste a whole season pushing these two back together when they were magnets on completely different fridges in different states? There's no reason to bring that kind of stuff up if you're not going to do something with it. Why would they push Jonathan and Nancy further apart and even continue to push them apart in the last moment that they're seen together? Steve and Nancy are in game. That's just how it is. I'm sorry for Jancy's, and it's sad. I mean, I wanted to like Jancy. It is a slowly dying tree. And it's frustrating, but it is how it is. These two characters don't work together anymore. So how I see it playing out, how I actually see it playing out, I imagine they would probably tease it until the last episode. They'd probably work it up into the point where Nancy either has a breaking point or some kind of realization that makes her realize that he's literally been standing here in front of me all last season. He's still here, and we're going through hell, and he's still here, and I'm going through hell, and he's still here. They'd probably push it until the last episode. 100%. How would I like to see it? I would imagine it's got to start with Nancy and Jonathan breaking up. The season would start with Nancy and Jonathan breaking up. It would be either her hearing a conversation between Jonathan and Joyce about how he's not going to college with Nancy and how he's already enrolled and gotten his letter for going to the school that Argyle's going. And he doesn't confront her about it because he wouldn't. And Nancy overhears the conversation between him and Joyce, and they break up. And from that moment, I would love to see her pursue Steve. Nancy has always been a very passive person when it comes to her love life. The guys come to her. The guys, you know, when she's doing the stuff at Murray's house, she's sitting in bed pondering it, but she doesn't move an inch until she starts to get out of the room, but he's already there. I don't think she would have actually gone all the way through with it. I see her walking up to his door and then walking back, and then maybe walking up to his door and then maybe walking back. I don't think she would have went all the way through it had he not been right there on the other side the moment she opens the door. And she's never shown genuine interest. She was pushed into a relationship with Jonathan by Murray, and now she's being kind of pushed into it a little bit with Steve by Robin and, you know, a little bit of Eddie, but that's more on Steve's side. But it's very much other people are kind of doing the pushing for her. And now Steve has come out and literally said it. I think it would have worked. I think it would have made it. And you're there. You're always there. He's put himself out there and made it very clear how he feels. The ball's in her court. So I'd love to see her pursue him. Show him that she's interested in him and into him and that she wants to have something serious with him. Do I think they go that route? No. But God, I'd love it. Not only that, but, and this isn't just a like, Steve deserves a good girl. Nancy deserves a good guy too. But seriously, Steve, his character and his arc and everything that he went through this last season, from a writer's perspective, you would love to see that guy finally get a girl who pursues him. He's looking for love in all the wrong places. He's wanting it. He's hoping for it. He's not expecting it. I'd love to see him completely floored by not just a girl chasing him for once, because he's been chasing Nancy. He was chasing Nancy in season 1 and hoping for more and not really getting it. But I'd love to see him just surprised that it's not just that, but it's also her specifically. Especially after she cheated on him.
Yeah, I would like that as well. I've seen people comment that, you know, season 4 was really Steve doing most of the talking and talking about how he feels.
Yeah.
And that, you know, season 5 is really Nancy's turn. And I hope we're going to see those type of big monologues and those type of, you know, her really expressing how she feels because, you know, I think
very quiet. She's been very quiet about how she feels. I'd love her to voice it, you know, instead of just trying to read it on her face.
Yeah, and I think there's even a good, you know, there's a good callback, I think, you know, when they're in the Upside Down in the Woods in season 4, and she goes, Steve, and she's about to respond, and then Robin interrupts them to their breakup in season 2. When Steve talks, she goes, Steve, and he says, it's okay, Nance, and walks away.
She doesn't say anything. She doesn't say anything. Yeah, and it's the same also in the alleyway after gym class when she pulls him out, and he walks away and she just stands there and says nothing. She is a very, very passive character who, when in relationships, is ready for the guy to make the decisions and for them to, you know, walk off. And she doesn't call them back. She doesn't reach back out to them. She's waiting for them to make that decision for her. And I get it. Nobody wants to make that kind of decision. A lot of those are very hard, very mature decisions to make, but she lets it happen to her. I'd very much like to see her on the side because when she's fighting Vecna, when she comes in with the gun and she's blazing it up, like she is very active. She is going to him. She is going to fight and destroy him. She does the same thing with the Demogorgon in season 1. She wants to capture him. She wants to kill him. And I'd love to see her actually kind of look at a relationship in a similar way. She knows that Steve is interested in her and he wants it. He's literally said it. She has nothing to lose by pursuing him if she wants it too. It's not like he's going to come out somewhere and just say, hey, sorry, like I changed my mind. All that shit that I said was completely made up. Like, my bad. I was just having a weak moment. It's not going to happen, and she knows it's not going to happen. He made it very clear that she's always been there. She's the most important part. He leaves no stone unturned in that conversation. There's not a single thing he leaves out that would leave her in denial or doubt that she is it for him. So, yeah, she's got nothing to lose. I don't see why she wouldn't. From a writer's perspective, I'd do it. I literally wrote it. I do it because I just, they both deserve it. Nancy deserves to be the one out there getting her mans. Absolutely she does, because she would at this point in time. And after like the slow car crash that is her and Jonathan's relationship and being put on the back burner by him for so long that he didn't even go back to Hawkins to see her, and he didn't care to have her come there. And then he was like not really motivated to call her, and then he lies to her face. She has been put on the sidelines by him this whole time. That sucks. And she knows that Steve wouldn't do that. And I'd like to see her, actually pursue someone because she wants it. God damn it. I mean, sorry. But really, she deserves it.
No, 100% I agree. And no need to be sorry. Like, I 100% agree with that. Swear all you want. Yeah, no, I completely agree. And it would be, you don't often see that in media where the girl pursues the guy.
Yeah, and Nancy would. She's a very strong woman.
Yeah, she's a very strong woman. And I also wonder if the fact that she's more passive, if that is a holdover from the original script, because from the sections I have read of it, she is even more passive. Like, she's an active participant in her relationship in the final version. She is extremely passive in the original, and he's basically this rich guy that takes advantage of her.
He does. She doesn't have a say in that scene. It's hard to read. I've read that scene a few times just because I always try to get back an idea of what could have been. It's hard to read. It's rough, but maybe a little bit of that. But I also wonder if ignoring that script and kind of just thinking of the character in and of herself, why she would be like that, it could be something from her that she's gotten from her mom, because it's very clear that Karen and Ted's relationship is not a very active, passionate one. I don't really see her mom being very active in that relationship at all. And her dad is very much the similar way. She's terrified of that kind of relationship, and it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy that she stands on the sidelines and doesn't think to say or do anything. She just lets Steve talk and do what he's going to do. And she's kind of like, maybe part of her is hoping that he will just stay. Maybe you don't have to say anything. He'll just choose to stay and I don't have to make a choice. But he doesn't choose to stay. He walks away. He leaves it in her court pretty much every time. He left it to her to make that decision, and she didn't make a decision, which is a decision in and of itself. We're going back full circle from the beginning of this episode, but it's literally like that. She doesn't make the decision. So by him leaving, that's it. It can't continue from there because he leaves it to her and she does nothing. Both times, every time, she does nothing. And I'd like to see her do something. I think she deserves it. Not just the character, not just the relationship, and not just Steve. I think Nancy has shown so much growth over the show that I think having her not be the one to activate the relationship, to really bring it back in, I think it'd be a disservice to the character, because she's shown that she is capable and responsible and mature enough to make that decision for herself, that she's ready to make that decision. She's ready to go after him instead of just watching him walk away.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And I think it's interesting in that, Nancy and Jonathan, I feel like in their relationships at this point are both characters that by not making a decision, they are making a decision.
And they're both not making decisions. They're both Nancy's.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the difference that you've kind of hit on is that Nancy is at least aware that that's what she's doing and has been, versus Jonathan seems to be like, if I don't say anything,
it'll just be fine. It'll just be fine. Because when he doesn't do anything, he gets the girl. He didn't do anything. She came to him for help with the stuff with Barb. He doesn't have to do anything. He doesn't have to work for it at all. It's always worked out for him.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the issues with Jonathan's character, that guy going the way that they did. And there's some really great Tumblr posts on this, but yeah, just the fact that, because, he does all this horrible stuff or does nothing at all, and he is rewarded by, he gets his brother back, he gets the girl, he eventually makes a best friend, he has this loving family.
And the only reason why his relationship is dying with Nancy is because he's literally not there in her life and she's being affected by it. It's nothing that he's not pushing her away, but he's not doing anything in and of itself. So he's sitting there thinking like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm good. As long as I just do nothing, we'll be fine. Nancy will come back. She always comes back. And she does. She has. Unfortunately for him, there's a Steve Harrington in Hawkins, and he's really hot, and she knows it, and he's become the exact kind of person that she finds extremely desirable, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, and how he handles things. He is the exact kind of person that you want, that Nancy would want, and she doesn't have anything from Jonathan. There's nothing to compare it to. It's almost inevitable, the choice that she's going to have to make, because she either does that or she gets shafted and ignored for 9 months.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, it's either Steve and Nancy are getting back together and riding off into the sunset at the end, or Nancy goes off to Emerson alone. Like, I don't like
either that or they try to hold on to the corpse of their relationship by going their separate ways and continuing to talk to each other maybe like once or twice a month, if that, and never really making anything more until it fizzles out and one of them stops calling, which it'll probably be Nancy because she'd get tired of it.
Yeah, and I feel like they're already at that stage, to be honest.
Yeah, a little bit. Season 4 didn't do them any favors. No, they're not in a great place. I don't know how anyone watches season 4 and ends with, wow, they are amazing. What a power couple. Like, well, what?
I don't get it either, because it's like, how do you watch, like, when I see people's comments, I'm like, up to season 3? Okay, like, I understand if that was your ship. I understand if you identify with those characters. I can understand that. But after watching season 4, I'm like, how do you look at that and think, like, yeah, like, how do you
denial, right? It's got to be denial.
I'm like, it's not just the river in Egypt. I mean, like, how else do you look at that and see that they're gonna make it? Like, because even that end scene, like, they can both tell that they're lying to each other, and they're just kind of like, Jonathan just can't admit what's going on, and Nancy's just holding out hope that, like, the letter will arrive and everything will be great. And
neither of them want to deal with it. They're like, this is a wound, it's going to heal, and we're just going to move on. We're just going to keep going. It's like that. No, this is something gaping and infested, and you're either going to have to cut it off or start some healing process. You're going to have to do something. Like, sitting there and ignoring it is not going to fix it. And you can see it in their faces. You can see that, yeah, everything was great. And her saying, I'm glad you weren't here. If I had my partner tell me that, I would not have been like, cool, peanut butter and jam, like, just fine. I'd be crushed. I would just be destroyed. If you're in an actual loving, committed relationship, time spent apart, especially time like that, where you've already been apart for an extended period of time, you went through hell. Who do you want by your side? Your best friend. You're not sitting there saying, I'm glad you weren't here. Not at all would you be thinking that, no matter what you went through in that moment, unless you're having really extreme emotional awakenings because of this hot ex that re-entered back into your life, and you're glad he wasn't around to see it. So, yeah, she's glad he wasn't there, because she's too busy gawking at Steve, as was everybody else.
Yeah, and on that note, yeah, like, and honestly, that end scene, like, just like, honestly, it just made Jonathan look so stupid, because I'm like, what the heck, like, this idiot, like, it's not like Nancy lives in a separate town, like, he knows that Steve still lives there, right? And like, the audacity of Jonathan to be like, if I do nothing, everything will be fine, knowing damn well your girlfriend lives is a beautiful, smart, caring person with a bright future, good family, and she lives in the same town as her super hot, wealthy ex, who spends all of his time driving your brother's friends around.
Yeah, like, he is in her orbit, whether he likes it or not. Like, Dustin is Steve's best friend. Dustin's best friend is Mike and the rest of the party. They are going to be around each other, whether anybody likes it or not. And even just that, even if it wasn't just that, you have Steve going to, like, even if it wasn't just Mike is what I mean. You have Steve going to the game for Lucas, to be there for Lucas. He's going on a date. Guess who is also there? Nancy Wheeler. They are in each other's lives. They're going to see each other not just because of her brother, but because of literally everybody in their lives. They are all around each other constantly. And knowing that the upside down thing has happened 3 times in the past, it could happen again. They're going to be around each other again because they all know that giant big secret. Because yes, Jonathan and Nancy have shared trauma, but you know who else has shared trauma? Literally everybody in that group.
I know, right?
Literally everybody in that group. You know who also has shared trauma? Steve and Nancy, because they were the 2 that were involved with Barb's death. That's shared trauma as well. You know who also has shared trauma? Steve and Jonathan. Steve and Jonathan and Nancy when they were monster hunting. Literally every single person in that group has shared trauma with each other. They were all in the cabin. Every single one of them lined up. Nancy with a gun, Steve with a nail bat. Jonathan, I think, was hiding behind someone. I can't remember. But, like, they were all there in that moment. They've all experienced this together 3 times. If she was going to gravitate to any guy, it's going to be Steve. And they've already been involved sexually. They've been involved emotionally. And those kind of situations force people to latch onto each other. And sorry, Jonathan, you weren't there. Like, it's going to happen. She's alone. And a girl at that age being alone for an extended period of time and not feeling very loved by her boyfriend is going to go elsewhere. It would just happen naturally.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, the fact that Jonathan knows all of that, and like the fact that it doesn't seem to occur to him. Like, I don't know if it's because he's high or if it's just like I don't know what it is, because he comes across as so dumb. Because I'm like, the fact that it doesn't seem to occur to him, especially like when he makes that comment. Which
he
is
must be insecure about it, right? He must,
right?
Because otherwise he wouldn't have insulted Steve in the first place, right?
He makes be like life multiple times, and he's got the audacity and the look on Nancy's face, like the proper response, like because people come back to that, but I'm like, the proper response, if you're in a real committed, like you said, a committed, loving relationship with somebody, even if you're good friends with somebody, if that's a legitimate relationship, you make a comment about somebody, and they, first of all, you look at their face to see how they react. He's not even looking at her face. He misses it entirely.
Yeah.
But you check, and if their face looks that disgusted with you, you immediately apologize and go, I am so sorry. That was clearly out of line. Like,
it was completely out of line. I mean, if I were in Nancy's shoes, I'd have been like, well, he saved your ass in season 1. He saved your ass in season 3. He saved all of the kids in season 2. What did Steve not do? And he's only gotten older and smarter and stronger since then. So what do you think he did this whole season? Just sit there and sell tapes? Like, what do you think he did? He was at the front of everything. He went through the gate first when they went to go and fight Vecna. He goes through first. Because it's going to be Steve. And to insult a person who, in literally season 1, saved his life and was capable in that fight. I mean, if season 1 Steve was against Demogorgon, season 4, he probably would have lost, maybe, let's be real. Season 4 Demogorgon is genuinely terrifying. But he handles his own against a terrifying monster that has already killed multiple people. And he doesn't even know Jonathan. Yes, he kind of owes him a little bit because, you know, he like started a fight kind of thing, but he didn't have to go back in there and save their lives. He did it, and he's flying by the seat of his pants with a weapon that he's never wielded before, and he wields it like a badass. Like, and he saves them, he protects them, and Jonathan has the nerve to say 4 years later, who would have been in charge? Steve.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. On top of that, like, Jonathan's, like, we established for, like, 3 seasons that Jonathan is a loner with no friends. Meanwhile, like, Steve is, like, head of multiple sports teams.
Yeah, he was captain of the basketball team, co-captain of the swim team. He's been a lifeguard for 3 years. I doubt that Jonathan doesn't know any of that. I bet you anything that Jonathan knows every single class Steve was in from the start of high school on. like, they're around each other. They know each other, whether they like it or not. And
Yeah, it's a small town. Exactly.
yeah, and to say that, like, I mean, obviously, if he's the captain of two sports teams, you're not going to sit there and say, he definitely doesn't have leadership qualities.
Oh,
What?
100%. And like, I think you can really see the contrast because, like, you can tell for good reason that Steve feels insecure and threatened by Jonathan and Nancy's relationship in seasons 1 and 2. And that proves to be, well founded. But by season, the difference between season 1 and season 2 is by season 2, even though Steve's not comfortable with it, he accepts it and is supportive of Nancy because he realizes, okay, they have this connection. I love Nancy. They are friends. He finds a way to be okay with it. And many people have pointed this out, but past season 1 and Steve's comments are 100% justified. We never see Steve say a single bad word about Jonathan, even though, from Steve's perspective, Jonathan is a creepy weirdo who does illegal shit.
Yeah. Instead he's saying like, yeah, you, me, Robin, Jonathan, if he comes out, he doesn't say Jonathan's name in a negative way, even remotely. And this is
a
long time after. I think I like to think that for Steve's perspective, I don't think he's ever really been I mean, obviously there's jealousy and he doesn't handle it well. I think he'd be terrified of seeing that kind of side of himself again, or knowing that side of him could come out at all. But I think some of it, I would have to assume that it's not so much being threatened by Jonathan as it is knowing that Nancy has feelings for Jonathan. So he's upset at Jonathan as a person, but he knows how Nancy feels. Does that make sense? So he
absolutely, yeah.
He knows that if he's insulting Jonathan, that's going to hurt Nancy's feelings if he's saying something like that. I doubt he even thinks that at this point in time he's doing his best to be a good person. But in season 1, none of his insults are aimed at Nancy or towards Nancy. It is all pushed at Jonathan, and it's about his family, who he is as a person. It's not, you are sleeping with my girlfriend. It's not about that at all. It's like, what the hell is wrong with you? Like, obviously you're not a good person. He's trying to like take it and do something else with it in his brain. He's not really looking at Nancy has feelings for you, that kind of thing, right? It's very much aimed at who Jonathan is. And so I don't think he'd say anything negative, because I don't think he'd really have anything negative to say at this point. He already said all of that, and he knew he was wrong. And he knew it wasn't okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to note, like, what Steve's saying, like, the fight, absolutely. The other stuff he says, though, like, when he breaks his camera, I'm like, Steve's 100% in the right there, but he said his piece. Like, he said his piece. I think
this is stalking, you're being creepy, like, what the hell?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think you really see that contrast, because, again, like, after that point, like, Steve is a character who says his piece and then moves on, whereas either Jonathan's holding a weird kind of grudge, or, I mean, obviously he feels insecure, whereas Steve handled that by being like, I'm going to trust my girlfriend, and that backfires due to the immense amount of trauma of Barb's death. Jonathan instead abandons his girlfriend, straight up abandons her, and then makes a crack at Steve. And at this point, like, we don't know what he knows, right? So it's like, he makes a crack at Steve. Obviously, he's feeling insecure. I mean, she's just like said, I'm glad you weren't here. Makes a crack at Steve, and then doesn't even look at her for how she receives that comment. And then she's like,
he's not paying attention to her feelings at all, which one of the things that I love about Steve's admission of his feelings to Nancy there in the Upside Down is he's sitting there saying, none of this is on you. This is on me. If I had been a good person, and if I was who I am now, if I was this, if I was that, none of it is focused on Nancy at all, because he doesn't want to push that onto her. He doesn't want to push any kind of responsibility of their relationship failing onto her. Steve is this kind of person. He takes accountability, whether he's in the wrong or not. When he's not breaking up, I mean, technically they do break up, but he's not literally saying like, we're breaking up. But when he's saying this is the end of it, he's saying, I was a bad boyfriend. I did this. And then he tells her it's okay. He doesn't want her weighed down by anything that has to do with him. He immediately removes that even possibility, even suspicion from her mind. He makes it immediately like, I made the mistake. I was in the wrong. I did this. It's my fault. Like, and same with the upside down. He's in there saying, if I had been different, if some girl had come along and changed me at that point in time, I think we would have worked out. Like, it's him. It's nothing to do with her. Whereas Jonathan, when he's doing it, it's all of it. It's the relationship itself he sees as being toxic. He's in there saying, she will resent me. She will hate me for these decisions I forced her into by being with my family. And da 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 da. He's pushing a lot of it onto her, even not with her around. He is making it her responsibility that their relationship fails. Like, not just her, him and her. But he not once is he sitting there saying, like, these are just my fears. He has already accepted it within his mind that she will resent him. And he obviously doesn't know her as a person, because I'm sorry, if he told her that he wants to stay there and go to school with Argyle, she'd be like, okay, all right, we'll figure it out. We'll make this work from here. Like, I'm going to go to Emerson. We'll just do our own thing. And then we'll figure it out. Summers will be great. We'll figure out Christmas, Thanksgiving, whatever. There's no way in hell she would drop her college career.
Like, Jonathan literally talks to Argyle about how, like, she's the most ambitious person he knows. And then turns out a few scenes later is like, she's going to she'll resent me because she'll drop everything to basically be barefoot and pregnant in California. So he sort of be with him while he attends some shitty community college and then have his kids. And she's like, I'm like, Nancy has never been that person.
She would not.
Not once. No, she's going to Emerson. She's going to be an award-winning journalist. Come hell or high water.
End of story.
End of story. And, like, I think part of what bothered me about Jonathan's storyline, too, is that a lot of it reminded me of an ex-boyfriend of mine. Like, the dissolution of my first real relationship. And,
rough.
Yeah, rough. And just, like, that whole thing where, like, I remember saying to a therapist at the time, like, talked about this, and they were like, well, or other relationships, too, where it's like, well, like, they literally said to me, they're like, okay, well, that's super sexist. Why are you expected to move? Why can't they move? Why can't they do this? Why do you as the woman have to? And I'm like, exactly. Yeah. Like, and that's the thing, right? He's not saying, I need to drop everything and go to Emerson. I've decided I don't want to do that, or we don't know if he didn't get it.
He's saying she either moves or this doesn't happen. Like, he's not saying that he's going to give anything. It's an ultimatum as far as he's concerned. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Xander and Anya's relationship in Buffy, especially during them deciding to get married and everything. The thing that ultimately ends up with that relationship not working is Xander's fear of being like his parents. Jonathan is very much that character. He's terrified of being like his father. He's terrified of having a relationship that doesn't succeed, while he is in a relationship that is not succeeding because of him himself. He's a self-fulfilling prophecy, just like Xander
100%. 100%.
It's sad because you want to sit there and tell him, you're seeing that side of Nancy, that great side of Nancy that's ambitious and stuff. But when you're seeing her give up, like, schooling and everything, why is that what you're seeing? Like, what part of Nancy and how you just described her tells you that that's what she's going to do? At all.
Yeah. No, 100%. And in contrast, I think Steve's perspective is instead like, I'm crawling forward, I'm figuring myself out, which means he knows she's going to Emerson. That's public news. We established that with Fred. And what Robin says too, that they're like, she's created this image that her and Jonathan are this power couple and they're going to Emerson. Like, she's crafted this image to make the relationship appropriate, to make it this great thing, because she has to once she commits to it. And so, like, his response is, oh, she's going to drop everything, which is just so inherently sexist, whereas Steve's response is, I'm crawling forward, I'm figuring it out. He knows she's going to Emerson, which means, I mean, he hasn't said this, but he doesn't need to. Again, smart audience. She's going to Emerson, like, he's definitely going with her. He can
100%.
Yeah.
He will adapt. He has shown he is an adaptable character. And not only that, but I love the two perspectives of these two men. You've got Jonathan, who's saying the most important part is my family. Joyce, Will, they are the most important part. And then you have Steve, who is saying, you are the most important part. Nancy's the most important part. He doesn't care if they go in an RV and have a bunch of kids and go riding around the country. He doesn't care if they stay in Hawkins. He wants to be with her. She is the important part, whether that's having a bunch of kids, having none kids, going to Emerson and seeing her flourish. He will be literally there cheering her the entire way. It is not about him at all. He tells her his dream, what he dreamed for when he was younger. He tells her his feelings, but he still tells her, you're the most important part. You're there. That is what matters, which is basically saying, if I go into this fight, win or lose, if you are there by my side, that is what matters. Period.
Yeah, absolutely 100%. Like, yeah, that is 100% it. And yeah, that's just it. And I mean, yeah, that's it. I mean, there's nothing else to say. I mean, yeah, and they've set that contest up so well. And yeah, Jonathan, I mean, it must be coming from a place of insecurity because I can't think what else that would be. And also, like, I thought originally while watching it, the minute she says, you know, he's actually grown up quite a bit, and he's like, oh yeah, sure, and like totally brushes it off. Again, like we said, in a loving, committed relationship, you turn to your partner, A, you check in, and B, you're like, oh yeah, like, did you guys get to spend some time together, you know, over spring break? Like, you ask them questions,
Yeah.
or you look at that and go, all right, we're on, like, I've been trying to slow motion break up with this person. He openly admits that to Argyle. Her and Steve clearly reconnected. I should do the right thing and allow her to pursue that if she wants to, out of love. Because, you know, when you love somebody, you truly want what's best for them, and been like, hey, you know what? Like, this isn't, I feel like she even says, you know, oh, you know, the universe is throwing stuff in the way of our big plans. You're like, you know what? You're right. This isn't working. I want you to be happy, you know, or I have to tell you something. I didn't get into Emerson, you know, like, and I want you to be happy. I want you to be free. Like that's the moment when you look at that person and go, okay. But he doesn't do that. He just keeps lying.
Yeah. He just keeps lying. And it's very telling that the last conversation that they have, they're both telling each other lies and connecting with each other. It's kind of, you know, it's a shame, but it's what it's been the whole season. They are just as distant as they were when he was in California. No distance has been like fixed. There's nothing there. They have nothing in common at this point. In fact, they have more in common with the house that they're fixing, this poor broken down cabin, than they have with each other. It's so sad. It's a shame, but it's inevitable because they can't be honest with each other.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Like they, you know, nothing has been done to bridge that gap. They are, yeah, you're right, just as distant.
And neither of them are trying to bridge the gap either. They don't care to.
No, exactly. And I think that's what people miss. They're like, well, they could do this, they could do that. Yeah, they could do lots of things.
But they're not.
They don't, and they don't want to. Like, that's what that makes super abundantly clear. And Jonathan's not even being careful. I mean, he says this stuff to Argyle. Like, the guy's best friend with his drug dealer, a guy he knows is regularly high, who can spill the beans at any moment. And he's not being careful at all.
Yeah.
And then they roll up to Hawkins, who is that guy. Like, no shade to Argyle. As far as he knows, Jonathan is, like, he's seen him talking to his family, talking to Nancy. Argyle's probably assuming at this point that he's being honest with them. Or that he's going to be. Like, he's just letting that guy be high and be around those people, knowing he could slip up and, like, knowing he could say something at any minute, not even meaning to.
Yeah, 100%.
He's not even being careful. And, like, I mean, never mind the fact that, you know, like, he's been letting that guy drive his siblings around high. Like, I mean.
Yeah, don't get me started there. I could go on forever.
I know. But yeah, I agree that the parallels are very clear there. And I think it's also very fitting at the end, that epic end shot that we see, where they zero in on Joyce grabbing Hopper's hand, and that really lovely moment there. And then, but when they pan back, you see that Nancy and Jonathan are holding hands, but they don't zero in on that moment. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's,
yeah.
to me, very intentional. And the fact that the only two people you have left at the end of that season kind of not paired up are Will and Steve and Nancy are clearly set up as endgame. And I've spoken about this before, but the only new significant character I want them to add is a love interest for Will, because he deserves his happy ending.
I'd love to see a love interest for Will. I don't know who on the earth it would be, but I
actually have a theory on this.
Oh,
So
tell me more.
So what I really want is, because we know that like the obviously the military is there, and like obviously there's stuff set up to like try and help people who've been like displaced by what they think is an earthquake.
Okay.
So, and obviously people are evacuating, but my theory is that, my kind of ideal scenario there is that it's another kid at school, possibly a year older than him. His family's in town because, his dad's in the army, or his mom works for the Red Cross, or, they're in town to help with what's going on. And it's one of those, like, we know that Will's been painting, and obviously he's very talented. Something like, kind of like Steve and Nancy in season 1, where it's like a teacher sees his work and is like, you're more advanced in this class. Let's bump you up from freshman to sophomore art or something like that. And so he meets a new student.
It would make sense for it to not be someone that was in Hawkins before, because there's so much baggage that comes with people that know the Byers family in Hawkins, right? Everybody knows everybody. It's a tiny little knit town, and they're thought of as pariahs. It would have to be someone new that comes in that looks at Will and doesn't see all of that baggage first hour. Like, yes, he'll learn everything later, but he gets to see Will as who Will is. I definitely, I would think it would have to be a new person that comes in to the picture that doesn't have all of that bad history. Because I mean, it's shown time and time again throughout Will's time in Hawkins, being bullied by kids during Halloween and everything, that the kids that are around him, they're either, they're very small, simple-minded people. He's got girls that crush on him and people that call him Zombie Boy. And neither of those are good things. So seeing someone new and completely unconnected to this stuff that has traumatized him over these years, I 100% could see it being something like that. I kind of hope it is. I think that would make the most sense.
Yeah, that's really what I'm hoping for, because I think it makes sense. It would also kind of, maybe one of their parents is somebody like kind of inside man that they get help from at a later point to tie it back to the rest of the plot.
Yeah.
Something like that. And my other thought too is, if it's a new character, if they're in town, like, somebody like that would move around a lot, right? So they'd be less likely to buy into the whole high school clique thing, make friends easily. Also, if you move to a new town and you admire somebody's art and you're like, oh, like that's awesome, and you become friends with them, his kind of quirky band of weirdos, all of his friends, and you hear really bizarre rumors about that person or their family, having met that person and you like them and they seem very nice and down to earth and they're a good artist and they're a very gentle person, like the assumption you make is, well, people are just saying shit.
Yeah,
like,
they don't know what they're talking about.
They don't know what they're talking about, or maybe there was some nugget of truth to this at some point, but people have blown it way out of proportion, so you just laugh the whole thing off. And I think Will really deserves someone like that in his life who's like, oh yeah, zombie boy, heard about that. People say the stupidest things, huh? Like,
right, yeah.
Someone who doesn't know all of that, who just gets to be himself.
They don't have all that baggage, right? They don't have the baggage that comes with the town. Yeah, I love that. That's cute.
That's my headcanon, and
I'm here for it.
Yeah, and I'd also kind of like, I'm hoping kind of dovetailing on that is kind of, we finally see Will maybe, taking more interest in his appearance and kind of finding his own style, and they get him out of that bowl cut.
Please let him cut his hair. Please let Noah Schnapp cut his hair. He wants it.
He's great hair.
He does.
Noah Schnapp has great hair. And
seeing him outside of the Stranger Things is a whole different person. He is so adorable and gorgeous. Like, let the kid be gorgeous. Yeah, well dressed, well mannered. He's hilarious, and I just, gosh, please do Will a solid. Cut his hair. Let him cut his hair.
They did
his bangs off his forehead. My goodness,
with that bowl cut, and like no one else on the show at this point looks like that. And coming back to the costuming, like I saw a video where they were talking about the costuming, and the head costume designer was like, yeah, like for Will's look, like we looked at yearbooks from that time, so he's not based off one specific character or person or model or actor from that time period. He's based off like a bunch of things kids would have worn at that time. And something I learned was that like the fact that he looks kind of awkward is intentional because they're trying to convey that he's trying to find himself. And
I kind of get that.
Yeah, that's intentional. And so I'd love kind of for his storyline to be, and not
him finding himself and he
Yeah.
gets rid of that hair.
Yeah, finding himself. And I'm also, I kind of have two fears on the powers. Either it's, he's got Satyria implanted in him or something about the lab. I can also see part of that, or maybe instead something about him kind of coming into his own, accepting himself, taking pride in his appearance, and the powers kind of blossoming out. Do you know what I mean? Like when you accept yourself, stop suppressing part of yourself. I could see it being something like that. And not that you should change for somebody, but I think in similar ways, like Steve changed, on the inside when he met Nancy, not on the outside. Whereas I think Will's an opposite thing. He's a great person on the inside, but his outside doesn't really match. And I'd love to see him meet somebody and have that be the catalyst to be like, I want to take more part of my appearance. And like maybe him and Steve team up and he's like, I want to impress this person. And Steve's like, as long as you promise not to change who you are, I'll help you do it. And like there could be some great fun there.
I'd love that, honestly. And Steve would be the person to ask. And not only that, but like you've got Dustin would be around, so he'd probably be spending a bit of time with Dustin since Lucas is obviously spending time with Max in the hospital, and Eleven and Mike are reconnecting again now that they're both back in Hawkins. It would be a great excuse to put him around Steve and a person who has been caring for his appearance since day one. Steve's like, I got you, fam. I can help you. Let's glow you up.
Yeah.
I could definitely see that. And not only that, but what you were saying to Will's appearance now, it is very much still that he's holding on to like that family aspect of himself and not so much just being Will. He is like a lot of his clothes that you see are clothes that he's worn through the show, things that have, have that Byers family feel. It is still very much just he is a person in his family.
Yeah, exactly. And I think part of it's part of him suppressing and not being able to accept who he is, which would be very incredibly difficult in that time period.
Yeah. It was hard in the 90s. It was hard in the early aughts. It was difficult.
I can't, but it's harder.
It's so hard, especially for men. Like women, guys, if they weren't being absolute monsters about it, guys would laugh it off and say like, yeah, every girl, that's hot, like whatever, but a guy, it's so much worse and so much harder for men because they look at them and they're like, oh, you're like a sissy boy, like what's wrong with you? And they would be harsh, especially in the early 80s. That would be horrible. I mean, now we're at 86 and it's just going to get worse. There's a lot of horrible crimes that were happening in the late 80s that just gosh, and it's in such a small town. I mean, going to California is a little bit of a breath of fresh air, but it's still the 80s.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I feel like he's also kind of suppressing that, but also like a little bit trying to hang on to his childhood as well. And we've seen that really well pointed out, I think, in season 2 and 3 especially.
Where he's wanting to play D&D with the boys and everything like that. Yeah, very much still trying to hold on to the past. Anyway, we're a Will Byers podcast now. Sorry.
Yes, no, Will Byers podcast.
Probably get back to the Stancy of it all, but I can't help it. I love talking about like every aspect of the show. There's so much thought-provoking things with every single character, minor or large. Like it just, it's great. I love them all.
Yeah, there's a lot of depth and a lot of things to really dive into.
There's something for everybody. You can dig your fingers in any direction and find so much.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. And I feel like every discussion leads to more discussion. That's something I really love about the show. And I think it's something that if they stick the landing, which I think they will,
I think they will.
With what they've set up, because we know they've had a plan. And that's, to me, from a viewer's perspective and as a writer as well, having a plan is the most like adapt the plan, which they're good at, but have one.
Yes.
Because so many shows do, or you know what I mean? They don't have that, and they adapt it so greatly that it loses shape.
Yeah, you need some kind of guidelines, some kind of end game. You have to have some kind of plan for where these characters end up. And if you have to shift that a little bit as you go, That's perfectly fine. It's like chess, right? When you're playing chess, you're having to choose, like, what's going to happen in 10 moves? What is my game? What pieces am I aiming to take out at X and Y, Z in time? And you're sitting there changing things because the person on the other side changes too, and you have to adapt to that. So it's very much, you want to have, or you want to at least think the writers have that in-game plan in mind. They know where they want their pieces to be. They know where each character is supposed to land. And should they have to change things a little bit, that's fine. But what remains intact at the end should still be recognizable from what they planned initially. If they planned something.
I come to that just because they've outright said that. Like that Netflix, that like after show that they did where they were straight up asked, like, did like the reveal with Henry, with Vecna, with one, like, was that planned out from the beginning? They were like, the reveal wasn't, the twist wasn't, but everything that went into that to get to that final point was. And that's like awesome. Yeah, and that's what gives you the confidence, right? They said, okay, there's things we've held back from like the upside down like Bible that we've created. You'll see it in season 5. We've had the plan from the beginning, but then we adjusted. Like, we've adjusted accordingly, but there's set marks that they have to hit, and they've, like, by their own admission, they've hit the marks so far with the time that they've had. So yeah, I have confidence in that, and I'm really excited to see how it plays out. And I think this will definitely be a show that has a lot of really great rewatch value if they stick the landing, which I think they will.
Hopefully they don't go the Game of Thrones route, that's...
Yeah.
What's Game of Thrones? Nobody knows. Nobody talks about it anymore. We don't talk about that.
Not anymore, exactly. And that's our show. If you like what you heard today, be sure to subscribe and tell your friends. Our theme music is provided by Neon Knights. Thank you for listening to this episode of Ham Radio, a Stranger Things podcast. Please join us next time, same dial, same time.
Over and out.